Students from EURASIA Foundation from Asia, Burgos University 2021 course on sustainability, resilience, ethics, and social responsibility in EURASIA community amidst a global coronavirus pandemic. Thank you so much for joining in today, and I am very delighted to introduce as an international guest today in our course, Professor Son from Rutgers University. Professor Wiejie Son received his PhD in comparative literature at Beijing University and his PhD in East Asian Studies at Columbia University. He is an associate professor of Chinese and comparative literature at Rutgers University, and his research include modern Chinese literature and film, urban and environmental humanities, martial arts and popular culture, as well as Sinophone and diaspora studies. He is the author of Mapping Modern Beijing, Space, Emotion, Literary Topography, that was published in 2017 by Oxford University Press. And in Chinese, he's also published From Entertainment Activity to Utopian Impulse, Rereading Jin Jiang's Martial Arts Fiction and China Literature and the United States, Images of China in America and Chinese American Novel and Drama. His current research projects include ideology, environmental objects, and Chinese eco-criticism, Chibaru's psychogeography, martial arts, avant-garde, cinema, and reviving Northeastern China, contemporary literature and film beyond the Great Wall. And he's the editor of selected works of Xu Dixin, and he's the co-editor of Environmental Humanities, Eco-Criticism, Nature Writing, and Northeast China Reader, which is a work in progress. And well, he's also the Chinese translator and co-translator of Repressed Modernities, Translingual Practice, Comparative Poetics, a Structural Transformation of Public Sphere, Understanding Popular Culture, and After the Divine, Modernism, Mass Culture, and Postmodernism. That is an impressive resume, Dr. Sun. And as I said before, it's a great pleasure to have you today. His lecture is going to be titled Sustainable Thinking, Chinese Environmental Imaginations. So thank you so much, and thank you for connecting with the time difference also in United States. So it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Professor Xiana Sotelo. Thank you. Hello, fellows. We have the technical difficulties. You know, it's always happened. And then this is the time of COVID-19 pandemic, so it makes things even, more challenging. And then good morning, good afternoon, here. So it's my great honor and pleasure to give this lecture for the University of Burgos. And also I'm deeply grateful for Professor Xiana Sotelo's, kind invitation and also this wonderful opportunity. I prepared a few film clips, but now I guess, have to skip that. I'm going to go through all these, colorful clips. Hopefully, the PPTs can give you, the ideas of my project. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's start. So the title is Chinese Environmental Imagination. Here you can see. So this is my main question of this project. So confronting with the growing environmental and ecological crisis, and also the use and abuse of natural landscapes and resources, among many others. So this is the time we are confronting with. Chinese environmental imagination, in particular literary, cinematic, and artistic works, explore the relationship between humanity and nature, tensions between local policies and global forces, contradictions of bioethics in human development and economic modernization, as well as the entanglements of eco-aesthetics and eco-politics, evidence in personal stories, and also public awareness, private records, and also you can see the national discourse and the stories and narratives. Yeah, Shanna, please move to the next slide. So this lecture, I'm going to examine and also consider the imagery of smokestacks, both as a concrete object and also an abstract concept, which emerged in works ranging from early Chinese futurist eulogy to modernist elegy, from Maoist propaganda to post-socialist eco-critical reflections and post-fifth generation requiem for communism, and from literary imagination to artistic representation. Later on, I will also introduce the smokestack imageries and also sentiments in Europe, in North America, in Asia, give you more ideas about this particular object as a significant environmental object and also a theme and also a concept and then an imagination. Next, please. Number one here, I'm supposed to show you a film clips, lovely, but then I have to skip. So I first briefly address the aesthetic and the political encounter with the gigantic smokestacks in Republican China from 1911 to 1949, and then that's the year 1920 in Japan, actually in Asia. So the aesthetic and the political encounter with the gigantic smokestacks in Republican China so as to contextualize the recent smokestack sentiments. As early as the 1920s, modern Chinese writers of literary school, one particular group called Creation Society, passionately embraced the advent of Western science and technology. So here is a leading role. His name is Guo Moruo, an erudite scholar, writer. And the Creation Society's leading poet here, Guo Moruo, eulogized the spectacles of a prosperous industrial metropolis using the metaphor of a harmonious symphony and a happy wedding between nature and human life. He also compared the smokes of steamboat smokestacks to black peonies, noble flowers of the 20th century. And also here you can see that's the word from him. Can you see? I cannot see the slide. Sorry, Shanna.
The other one? Okay.
Yeah, the slide is missing. Can you see me now? It's right over here. Great. Can you see one more time?
This one?
No, the previous one.
This one?
Okay, good. Here. Beautiful. Yeah. And also you can see it's called not only the noble flowers and also black peonies, beautiful flower, but also the strict mother of modern civilization. You can see many wonderful, beautiful, big words about this. This would be one type of smokestack sentiment. Next, please. In the same group, this is a famous writer, Yu Dafu, and such images, especially the black peonies, exerted a powerful influence on popular perceptions of modernization and modernity. Smokestacks, together with steamboats, automobile vehicles, railway trains, among other eye-catching spectacles, emblematizes the advent of modern industrial civilization. Okay, next, please. But then we have another different feelings, emotions, and sentiment. Here you can see, nevertheless, some other writers hold different and critical attitudes toward smokestacks and local westernized industrialization. For example, 6 years later, in 1926, Gao Changhong, so on top of it, you can see the image of the writer, once depicted modern Shanghai as follows. This is the large, broad city image. So people say that seeing from afar, Shanghai is a smokestack. It is right in this smokestack we can see scientific achievements, obscene capitalists, imperialist iron hills, newest and highest artistic creations, and all others. Next, please. And then now we can move to the 1930s, especially 1937, a female writer, poet, architect. So in the 1930s, Lin Huiyin, you can see here, the female writer, a female poet, architect, and a core member of the literary school, another school, the Beijing School, conveyed her deep concerns about the generous phase of modernization, industrialization, and environmental impairments. She invoked images of menacing, gigantic, and disturbing smokestacks emerging on the horizon of Beijing, an ancient city caught in the process of modernization. Next, please. So you can see in the middle, a huge smokestack, and then you can see the image of Beijing at that time, ancient capital. On top, you can see two images of the female author, architect, and the poet. So in her work, especially the poem in 1937 called Spring Scenes of the Ancient Capital, the abstract modern times and industrial civilization were transformed into visible and tangible smokestacks in harmoniously juxtaposed with another set of everyday objects of the old city. Beautiful, romantic. You can see indigo curtain, old balusters, and ruby red candied hawthorns, among others. For Lin Huiyin, these daily objects symbolize the old yet romantic urban experience. In spite of the sandstorms of the spring, a sweet and old Beijing was like the fresh red candy hawthorns, a small but radiantly utopian image, still ablaze, stick upon stick, like aged coral, still unafraid of the new year's dust. This is the poem. So Lin Huiyin's representation of smokestacks demonstrated her keen aesthetic and environmental awareness when confronting an increasingly polluted and vanishing ancient capital. Okay, next, please. And then we enter to 1949, the later years. So after the year of 1949, the founding of PRC, at the beginning of the socialist regime, the smokestacks were eulogized as a symbolic icon of socialist industrial modernization. So the Maoist vision of modernized Beijing was best manifested in Mao's conversation with Peng Zhen on the right, the first mayor of Beijing in the new republic. So standing on the top of the Gate of Heavenly Peace, we also call it Tiananmen Square. So Mao proudly pronounced, here that's the image and imagination, we will see a forest of smokestacks from here. So for Lin Huiyin, this forest of smokestacks was the recurrence of the environmental nightmare of modernity, in which glamorous black peonies and the dark noble flowers were blooming in the very heart of Beijing. But then we will travel to London, to Manchester, and then to even to Soviet Union, other part of sea. That was 1952. So something more important for us to consider. Okay, next please. And then 2 years later, here in 1951, one salient example of smokestack in this early stage, socialist China, can be found in Xian Qun's film. It was the 1952 film adaptation of Lao She's 1951 three-act play, a drama called Dragon Beer Ditch. A professor from University of Washington, Yumi Brister, calls our attention to the ending of the influential artwork. Here, the quotation. The beep focus and the mise-en-scene guide the viewer toward the back, where a smokestack rises in the rear center. You can see that here, black and white, that's the film, and also a poster, colorful, right? So you can see the smokestack and also the smoke. So the cinema provides a socialist realist scenario with an ending of a remote smokestack, point of pride of Chinese socialist industrialization and modernization in 1950s. Both the cinema and the play show how the new socialist government transforms an infamous stinking ditch and slum into a happy and sanitary community where the inhabitants are endowed with new class consciousness and released from a hygienic, ecological, and political morass. The remote smokestack in the cinematic adaptation, more or less, functions as a coordinate or serves as a beacon, torch, or light tower, witnessing and illustrating the socialist construction and industrial development. Another, we can see huge feelings and emotions. Let me explain later. Okay, Shanna, please, next one. And then again, for this period, from 1949 to 1976, the smokestacks, once criticized as a token of repressive industrialization and capitalism in Republican Chinese literature, film, and woodcut art before 1949, now had re-emerged and transformed into an icon of socialist construction in the high Cold War era. It provided literary texts, theatrical performances, cinematic productions, and socialist paintings, water, ink, or oil. Okay, next, please. So this is an example, a masterpiece in 1958. You can see the traditional Chinese paintings, and then from background, from afar, you can see the smokestacks and also the smoke. Beautiful, right? So it's kind of aesthetic poetry like trees anyway here. A leading scholar, Julia Andrews from Ohio State University. So she focused on Fu Bao's artwork, Ode to Yu Hua Tai, you can see on the right, painted to illustrate a contemporary commemoration of communist soldiers who died in a nationalist prison in Nanjing, and points out, you can see a few interesting points. The painting is highly romanticized view of the city of Nanjing, in which industrial images are used to extraordinary pictorial effect. And then the foreground is defined somewhat photographically by pine branches hanging down from the upper right corners. So pine trees are everywhere. You can notice symbolic meanings over here. And then less photogenic, but with surprisingly abstract beauty, are the delicately rendered power lines. You know, the corner here, the power lines sweeping across the lower right section of the picture, still beautified here. And then the middle ground, in which a memorial still dominates a tree-covered hill, occupies the left side of the picture. So you can see the left afar. And then a tiny file of young pioneers proceed along a hilltop path to pay respects to the heroes. You can see group, the young generation, the future generation, and the last here you can see. In the distance, we see the hazy city, its smokestacks emitting delicate strokes of gray ink, right? So that's, you can see another media to highlight the importance and meanings of smokestack sentiments and also imaginations and more. Okay, next, please. But then we can travel to the new era. We can call it the reform era after 1976 or 1978, 79. So nevertheless, since Mao passed away in 1976 and China entered the reform era, the smokestacks have been widely understood as vestiges of the problematic socialist practice or signs of both utopian blueprints and dystopian ruins in the Maoist development and environmental conditions. You can see another new feelings and emotions. From reportage to fiction and poetry, from cinematic representation to art exhibitions, the growing challenges of ecological deterioration propelled Chinese film directors, artists, and writers to expose current industrial pollution and to call for environmental protection. For example, Xiaojue, on the left you can see, his Beijing Out of Balance, published in 1986, revealed the lack of water resources in Beijing and warned people of the costs and the dangers in obsession with producing iron, steel, foundry cokes, and plastics. So that's, you can see the environmental challenges and crises are looming large. Okay, next, please. And then this is the year 1999, a female writer, Ye Guangcen. So her picking mulberries captured a scene that the ancestral grave is demolished and rebuilt as a cement factory, where smokestacks spray gray dust and crushing, grinding, and dedusting equipment making loud noises. Next, please. And then we can see two major feelings here. This is the year 2015, very quickly. So the most remarkable, controversial, yet ephemeral documentary is Under the Dome, 2015, a self-financed and TED-like artwork by the former CCTV host Chai Jing, who once agreed that, here you can see the quotations, coal brought warmth and energy, and that was significant. After 1980, Beijing had over 3,000 factories. For an agrarian nation that was eager to expand, smokestacks were a symbol of progress. Next, please. Yet, during the process of preparing a series of interviews and reports, Chai Jing, the female writer, reporter, she realized that the formless threats and harms posed by different types of pollutions were looming large, thus proactively changed and redefined her role and strategies to confront the environmental predicament. So at the time when she saw this, I was no longer a reporter, but an eyewitness. Next, please. So Under the Dome provides a scientific, multidisciplinary, personal, and emotional investigation of the prolonged and severe smog haunting Beijing and China, and lists smokestacks and related industrial and chemical pollutants as the source of Chinese environmental and ecological crisis. Yeah, next, please. And then I try to provide some critical, analysis with some big terms with the scholars. So this belated eco-critical epiphany compellingly responds to Lawrence Buell, a professor at Harvard. We can see the founder of this kind of environmental criticism. So Professor Lawrence Buell's prophetic interpretation of toxic discourse. The fear of a poisoned world is being increasingly pressed, debated, debunked, and reiterated from many disciplinary vantage points: medicine, political science, history, sociology, economics, and ethics, among many others. Okay, next, please. And then in the same year, 2015, we can see Jia Zhangke, so he will come back very soon, a leading film director. So he produced a very short, only 7-minute documentary. It's called Smog Journeys. So it is a 7-minute dialogue-free documentary made for the Greenpeace. Begins with smokestacks. Actually, you can see the difference between smokestacks and also the cooling towers of thermal power plants. There should be different as an iconic and a gigantic existence. So Jia Zhangke gave shape to slow violence, to use Bob Nixon's term, and present coughing peasants in the countryside. A girl with sand-proofed headscarf talking to her lover in front of the smokestacks. A masked boy playing soccer in the city. A young couple of miners sending their baby to the doctor for respiratory disease. Urban inhabitants struggling in their everyday life, besieged by smog and smoke. This continues. And in the end, a masked teenager sketching a beautiful sky on a dusty car to imagine a hopeful environmental future for the silent majority, for him, for the generation, and more. Oh, next, please. And then also the same year, 2015, Zhao Liang's film, Behemoth, provides an artistic and documentary representation of the vast mining industry, ghost city, Mongolian Paris, air pollution, and its catastrophic impact on coal miners' health. So we can see the film, the long-distance shots of many smokestacks, including fires and the black smokes. We see that's the scene in 1920, and the mid-distance shots of piled-up trucks with coals and working scenes, and the close-ups of the working hands and exhausted faces. All in all, here you can see, bring to the limelight the heavy breaths and painful coughs of sick miners, the juxtaposition of smokestacks and new tombs in the graveyard for the victims of reckless mining industry, as well as an ecological nightmare of developmentalism and the backwardness, abused manpower, and ruined environment. Okay, next, please. So even for another film here, this is the blockbuster film, Stephen Chow, Zhou Xingzhi, very famous. The film is entitled The Mermaid. Starts with the shocking scenes of polluted waters, slaughtered animals, uncontrolled deforestation, and piles of smokestacks and black smokes, among others, to exhibit the environmental and ecological dilemma and the calamity in contemporary human societies. Okay, next, please. So that's the group, the crucial year 2015, we can see many works focusing on what I would call the belated awakening of ecological and also, environmental awareness. But then if smokestacks turn to be dysfunctional, we can see another types of feelings, emotions here. We can call it post-industrial nostalgia, even smokestack nostalgia as well. So we can see these types of feelings and emotions. But it is also worth noting that years earlier than this transitional time, 2015, marked by the belated awakening of eco-critical concerns, another type of structural feelings, to borrow Raymond Williams' term, emerged and endured in the post-Maoist, post-fifth generation, even the sixth and the underground generation film productions. Next, please. So here you can see on top, right, this Raymond Williams. So you can see that's the term, structural feelings. Raymond Williams understands structural feeling as affective elements of consciousness and relationships, not feeling against thought, but thought as felt and feeling as thought. That's why I can see here, the combination of thoughts and also feelings, ideas, things, objects, and more. Let's see. So practical consciousness of a present kind in a living and interrelating continuity here. And then on the bottom, this is Professor Karen Thumber from Harvard. Also, she studied with Lawrence Biwell, a scholar at Harvard as well. The new representations showcase smokestacks, sometimes dysfunctional, with symptomatic eco-ambiguity. So this term from Karen Thumber, eco-ambiguity. So coming to mind would be the 7 types of ambiguity E.P. Epson, many years ago. You can see a kind of definition of this eco-ambiguity. The complex, contradictory interactions between people and the environment with a significant non-human presence. Okay, next, please. So this is a long list. We have different small feelings here. So number 1, we travel back to 1994. So I prepare a slide, lovely, this is a beautiful film, and then just maybe in the future I can send that to Professor Xiaojue Sotelo. Anyway, Jiangwen. So this film is called In the Heat of the Sun. The youth subculture, young rebels, their feelings, emotion, and more here. So this film, In the Heat of the Sun, captures a dysfunctional smokestack, you can see very huge, a relic of Maoist industrial construction, dysfunctional, which stands out as a vertical rite of passage to exhibit the protagonist's courage, adventure, flirtation, romance, masculinity, and self-esteem among a gang of wild teenagers during the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976. Okay, next, please. And then we even travel further back to 1934, so 1930s. So black and white film, a silent film. Sun Yu, a film director. So early in 1934, Sun Yu's silent film, Queen of Sports, showcased a modern girl.
Dr. Son,
yeah.
Excuse me, I lost your voice.
Okay, let me try.
Okay, now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I heard loud sound, noises. So it's good now?
Yeah, it's great now.
But you can see, let's combine this film together. The film in 1994, In the Heat of the Sun, right? The young teenager boys, courage and also epiphany, right? About love, adventure, romance. And then back to 1934, it's another story regarding climbing, conquering, the smokestacks, male and female, their perspectives, their behaviors, and also their victories. Okay, next, please. And now let's return to 1990s. So this is year 1999. So Zhang Yuan's film, 17 Years, subtly situates family conflict and reconciliation, homecoming, into the context of the post-industrial northern city here. So where smokestacks, together with other gigantic objects, visualize what Bethany Sereno illustrates the disorientation of the protagonist. Actually, she is a female prisoner and also the spectator here. So within the changing and challenging urban environment of code here, large avenues, busy intersections, advertising billboards, smokestacks, makeshift shelters, deserted streets on the outskirts, grey housing projects. Okay, next please. And then we can travel to the beginning of the 21st century, 2002, before and after. So Wang Bing's film, very long, it's 551 minutes. It's a long documentary. And also it's an experimental masterpiece called 铁西区, west of the tracks. Think about the rusty area everywhere in the world. So this documentary visualizes 3 smokestacks, one visible, the other 2 rather dim in a smoggy winter day, as a material token of the declining socialist industry in the rusty area of northeast China, and it evokes an eerie and bleak tranquility except for the teeny human figures slowly traversing the space and the dense smoke coming from a smokestack on the right edge of the frame. Okay, next please. And then another masterpiece in 2003 here. So Liang's film Brand Shaft ends with a striking shot of a smokestack of the sanatorium contributed by the constant effort of shooting from eye-level object. Here, let's see. So the smokestack emits black smoke and provides a dark epiphany about the fortune and misery, innocence and the crime for a young coal miner and survivor as well, to ponder on his tragic comedy at the threshold of life and death in an uneven post-Maoist and developmentalist local society. Okay, next please. And then the film, okay, still Jia Zhangke, you know, the master here. So I mentioned his film, The Smoke Journey, 7 minutes, and then he's going to talk about 3 films by Jia Zhangke. 11 years before shooting his 7-minute eco-critical documentary, Smoke Journeys, Jia Zhangke's film, The World, 2004, ends with the death of the female protagonist and her boyfriend here, against the reckless and repressing image of a towering factory smokestack belching gas flames into the Beijing sky behind him. Okay, next please. And this one has the connection with Spain, with Complutense University of Madrid, so you should be proud of him. He's a leading figure, very important. So his name is Liu Xiaodong. So acclaimed artist Liu Xiaodong, the leading role of Jia Zhangke's biographical documentary Dong, his first name, the thinker and the cooperator in conceptually conceiving the masterpiece Still Life in 2006, and also an alumnus of Complutense University of Madrid, so displays an extraordinary combination of smokestack, thick smoke, horses, nomads, and barren land, rainbow, and cloudy sky on this masterpiece. Is called Qinghai Tibetan Plateau in this painting. Okay, next please. Still back to Jia Zhangke, this is the year 2008. So the film is entitled 24 City. So this film envisages a transient image of a gigantic smokestack above the deserted factory buildings with the broken windows and glasses, and tells the story of post-Maoist new generations' struggle and rebel. So they will abandon their parents' profession, stepping out from the track designed by his father generation, and embarking on a new path with passion, expectation, and rebellion as well. Okay, here, next please. And then again, still Jia Zhangke. So this is year 2010. One episode in Jia Zhangke's film documentary, I Wish I Knew, Story About Shanghai, features Wang Baomei in the middle, a historical figure and female model textile worker in 1950s Shanghai. Jia Zhangke incorporates excerpts from Xi Jin's film in 1958, a black and white biographical film about Wang Baomei, showcasing the image of smokestacks twice, from Xi's biopic to reiterate the collective past, as well as the strength and pride of working class in the socialist metropolis. Okay, next please. And then this musical film. So when choosing a setting for his musical film, very pioneering in China, Perhaps Love, in 2005, Peter Chan, a film director from Hong Kong, So he caught sight of smokestacks in the 21st century Beijing and regard the industrial spectacles as Beijing's most beautiful scenery, colored by industrial nostalgia. You can see the feelings, right? Different, complected. And in the film, he uses smokestacks as the backdrop and witness to the wandering youth and the bygone dream colored by innocent people and hope. Okay, next please. So this is from Canada, but then stories about China is a documentary. So Edward Bertinsky's Manufactured Landscapes in 2006, together with Jennifer Backwell's cinematography, visualizes the beauty and the cruelty of large-scale smokestacks and the devastated landscapes in China, with the captivating and controversial connections and tensions among images, could be still and moving, sounds, voiceover and music, as well as words from artists to the local Chinese interviewees. So this experimental film ends with the sun shining over the smokestacks and then the neon lights, lighting up the black coals. Next, please. And the most important one in this type of feelings, so Zhang Meng's film. So the most sophisticated and representative illustration and illumination of the smokestack metamorphosis in this way appears in Zhang Meng's film, The Piano in a Factory, produced in 2010, where smokestacks are depicted as an abandoned emblem of the insulted and injured working class, a warped remnant of the bygone past of the moist era economy factory, as well as haunting sign of early Chinese socialist ethics, proletarian sentiment, working class pride, individual discovery, and collective dignity now worn out by the post-modern deindustrialization and globalization, developmentalism, and social injustice. Okay, next, please. Let's see here. This is I prepare film clips, but now let's see the lines from the film, bidding farewell to the huge smokestacks. So Zhang Meng famously visualizes the ritual of bidding farewell to the two about to be demolished smokestacks with feelings of mourning and nostalgia. Let me quote. For some, the smokestacks, they represent memories of growing up. For some, they are signposts on the way home from work. For some, they are just two smokestacks. For me, an engineer, retired, trained in Soviet Union. For me, they are like long forgotten old friend. One day you hear that they are leaving, and it occurs to you that they, the smokestacks, have always been close to you. You don't know whether to persuade them to stay or suddenly watch them depart. Suddenly, you feel indescribably sad, as if there's something you should say, but you don't know what it is. Time passes imperceptibly, society changes, and the current march to development requires them to go. But we should always try, and if we succeed, they will be transformed into a beautiful attraction. If we fail, they, again still, the two smokestacks, dysfunctional, they will become our most treasured memories. So very touching, very complicated. Oh, next, please. So in a different yet related context, let's travel to Europe. So Jefferson Covey and Joseph Hitchcock examined the problematic smoke nostalgia, the industrial decline, environmental disaster, and the dual symbolism of smokestack industries, part might, power, and prosperity, but part pollution, waste, and toxicity. The point of departure for any discussion of deindustrialization must be respect for the despair and betrayal felt by workers, the working class, as their mines, factories, and mills were potlucked, abandoned, turned into artistic shopping spaces, or even demonized here. Another recent and nuanced study of photographic smokestacks, an alternative mode of nostalgia for a bygone industrial past, is vividly evidenced in another scholar, Tim Strungelmann's juxtapositions of smokestack nostalgia, ruin porn, working class obituary and a deindustrial representation in 2013. Okay, next please. Again, go back to the film, The Piano in a Factory. So regarding this film, Dai Jinhua, a prolific film and culture critic, a professor at the Beijing University, analyzes Zhang Meng's psychoanalytic understanding of the two smokestacks as the failures of the working class, and further responds with an insightful interpretation that the blasting of the smokestacks not only extends and reiterates Chen Guilin, the protagonist's feelings of helplessness as he reluctantly gives up his daughter, but also provides a straightforward castration scene for the symbolic death of the worker as father. But then I have a different approach. So I would take a different critical analysis and argue that these functional smokestacks lose their environmental jeopardy and remain or function as a relic of the socialist and industrial past, a witness to the change of working community and class consciousness in post-Maoist cinematic representations, a token of nostalgia of the bygone era and collective awareness, a landmark tower-like clock or time machine sunspot, and a precious friendship to be cherished in the post-industrial memory and trauma at the beginning of the 21st century. Okay, next please. And then let's see, so I've tried to extend this investigation to a larger view. So let's focus on the smokestack imageries and the sentiments in Europe, North America, and Asia. Okay, next please. Number one, 1870s and 1880s, Monet and Van Gogh here, you can see. Beautiful, right? So smokestacks as aesthetic and environmental object evidence in the masterpiece over here. And then the feelings toward the smokestacks, still we view it from afar, right? Like trees and the beautiful smokes, coming to mind would be the Chinese story in 1920s. So now from 21st century, we may have different feelings regarding this. So still it's beautiful, maybe not. It's a token of pollution, or it's maybe still a welcoming sign about the industrial revolution. It's up to you. Okay, next please. And then in France, this is in the year 1929, the French philosopher Georges Bataille, and then the book Writings on Laughter, Sacrifice, Nature, Unknowing. And one small piece is entitled Smokestack, translated by Annette Michelson, the founder of the film studies at NYU, New York University. So here is the quotation. So when I review my own memories, it seems that for our generation, out of all the world's various objects first glimpsed in early childhood, the most fear-inspiring architectural form was by no means the church, however monstrous, but rather certain large smokestacks, true channels of communication between the ominous dual threatening sky and the muddy, stinking earth surrounding the textile and dye factories. How about that? No? Okay, move on. Next, please. And then in America, so that's the year 1931. So now we can see the smokestack and the factory scene is called classic landscape. You see the feelings, right? The different types of sentiments. Oh, next, please. And then from 1890s all the way to 1920s, we can see the stories in America. So we can focus on the big cities, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and others. Let's start from the very beginning in 1890s. So smokestacks from factory in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, belch black smoke into the atmosphere on top of it. In the middle, 1910, St. Louis. So the 4 Ps of industrialization on public health, the new concerns. So the 4 Ps, politics, population, poverty, and the pollution. And then let's travel to 1925. Okay, here again. So industrial smokestacks with railroad tracks and the cars at center Pittsburgh. Okay, next please. And then we have a wonderful anthology. It's entitled Smokestacks and Skyscrapers, an anthology of Chicago writing, published in 1999. Okay, again, the Chinese story, Shanghai, 1926. So the city is like a smokestack here. a wonderful anthology, right, focusing on smokestacks and also the city, Chicago. So there are 114 selections from the works of 71 authors in this very long overdue collections of Chicago writing, including here you can see different genres, short stories, novels, memoirs, plays, poetry, and essays, include the very big names, the Nobel Prize winners, the major writers you can see, such as Saul Bellow, Theodore Dreiser, Sherwood Anderson, Upton Sinclair, and also Richard Wright. Okay, this is a good example. Next, please. And then this is the story about North America as well. So it's covering 70 years from 1881 to 1951, published by Johns Hopkins University Press in 2003. So it's called Smokestacks and the Progressiveness, Environmentalist Engineers and Air Quality in America. So I guess now from Spain, from China, from Asia, and from North America, we share the similar concerns, right? So let's see here. So early reformers connected beauty, health, and cleanliness with morality and demanded government assistance in maintaining all of them. Air quality became an important issue for middle-class residents in coal-dependent cities. Pittsburgh, Chicago, and more is a long list. How could a city without pure air, they asked, truly be clean, healthy, and moral? So this still we can see in 2021, this kind of question still remains very important and significant. Oh, next, please. And then we know the crucial year, 1952, right? The Great Smog, London fog, London smog, and the many changes starting from 1952. Okay, next, please. And then this is something from different perspective. This book is called Smokestack Diplomacy, and then we can see the European stories. So many environmental problems across national boundaries and can be addressed only through international cooperations. In this book, published in 2001 by MIT, the author and the professor examines transnational efforts to promote environmental protection in the USSR and in 5 of its successor states here, Russia, Ukraine, and the Baltic republics of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania from the late 1960s to the beginning of the 21st century. Okay, next, please. And then Asia. So that's the masterpiece by Otsu. The film is entitled The Tokyo Story in 1953. You can see. So this film used smokestacks to witness post-war Japanese urbanization, industrialization, the rise of nuclear family, the generation gap between the city and the countryside. And next, please. So this 21st century, 2 scholars in London, so in Europe again. So they capture here, you can see the title, Flaming Smokestacks, Kojo Moe and Nighttime Victory Tourism in Japan. So smokestacks are the spectacles. They love this. They want to capture these, gigantic objects in the daytime, in nighttime, to show their love and passions. You can see. Okay, next, please. Okay, the last slide. So you can see with this smokestack, we travel to different parts of the world. So this is my main concern of this project. So to sum it up, the metamorphosis of smokestacks have materialized and incarnated from modernist poetry to realist reportage, from artworks to mainstream propaganda, and from underground documentary to avant-garde films. This large-scale environmental object and its illuminating eco-ambiguity envisions and exhibits the changing notions and practices of modern Chinese environmentalism, the structural transformation of feelings and emotions, and the transition of cultural memories and ecological awareness at a time of crisis. Okay, let me stop here. Thank you so much again, fellows and Professor Xiaojue Sotelo.
Thank you so much. Let me stop sharing. Let's see, where is this? Is it already shared? Yeah, I stopped, right? Okay, very good. So, well, thank thank you so much. It's been a really amazing and a very insightful, very also multidisciplinary approach to this literary narrative of sustainability and sustainable imaginations. You have not only covered China, but it's been a very interesting comparative analysis. So thank you very much for this enlightened lecture. Students, we would like to hear from you, your comments, questions, please. As always, I will start just a little bit of discussion and exchange before we move on to the next lecture. And well, I found so interesting how you have laid out this process of redefinition, this process of what you also laid out as metamorphosis, in the image, in the imagery of the smokestacks, and how you have blended this very needed discussion about how this is a combination of thought and a combination of feelings, and also this very interesting notion of eco-ambiguity. So along these concepts that you have highlighted, my comment and question has to do about this, the need of creating these synergies, right? You've also provided in your lecture your synergy about different disciplines, different critical approaches. But also for me, you know, the 21st century is a century of synergies between humanities and science, and that's why the field of environmental humanities is so necessary and is so thrilling and exciting, right? So what is the role of science? What is the role that science is playing, which is fundamental, right, in order to avoid ambiguities? Of course, the feeling is always going to be there. You very well pointed out how these smokestacks are for a lot of people an image of their childhood, and so there is this emotional component. But when it comes to thoughts, don't you think that this is so necessary to have scientific community also providing a solid ground, which I from my point of view and revision of eco-criticism in Europe, I find that scientific community is divided. So I wonder, how is that in terms of Asia, or particularly China, in this combination as we were coming down to feelings and thoughts? What is it? Is it a solid front? Is it a solid front accompanying all the literary and cultural voices, or is it a divided as it is in Europe?
Yeah, this is a brilliant question, Shana. Thank you so much. So I tried to answer the question with a few particular points. Number one, this is the term we can call eco-criticism or environmental studies, right? So it's interdisciplinary approaches. We must rely on, you know, the scientific investigation and also literary and cultural imagination and even artistic work over here, right? So first, you know, this is why I come to terms with this project. It's not only smokestacks. I try to focus on a few important things and objects, including smokestacks, plastics, water, air or smog, and the other things, you know, land and trees, the story of trees, right? Phytography, story of plant writing, and more over here. So this is not a typical literary studies. It's not a typical, you know, cultural approaches. It's interdisciplinary, right? So coming to mind would be a few terms. We know the material term, right? So we have a new sense of things. They're not only things. They have their own feelings, their locations, their traces, their genealogies, and more. So these material terms call our attention to focus on these particular, you know, objects and things in different contexts. We also have the special terms, the special images, right? Smokestacks in different locations in different parts of the world. It's also a combination of special term and also here material term and also affective term. What kind of feelings? It could be very personal, right? my fear. When I was young, I was 10 years old, I feel threatened by this, smokestack. Turned out to 17 years old, this is really something very brilliant and happy. And then this is kind of a token of memory when I was young, when I was brave, right? So that's, and then for the working class, how these dysfunctional smokestacks serve as a kind of nostalgia for them to imaginally go back, to work together, to share this kind of collective community and awareness and more. That's why to combine these material things and also feelings and emotions and the environmental challenges, right? So we can use by doing study of these environmental objects, we can go further. And I also mentioned that different types of feelings. So environmental crisis in China, in other parts of the world, is a belated awakening, right? That's why, before 1951, I guess, not only in China, but also in other parts of, even in London, in Japan, and also in North America, we still celebrate, this is the power, the might of, these smokestacks, and even, the smoke is okay, so it's not harmful at that time, perhaps. And then after that, we have new feelings, new emotions, new propaganda, new ideology, and new values, or new ethics and new scientific attitude toward things around us, right? So that's the belated epiphanies about these environmental things. So that's why you can see from the disciplines, science, humanities, and even social sciences, right? It's not only about sustainability, but also it's ethics, it's moralities. That's why here, in America, so for that anthology, they combine the air quality to morality to consider their life in contemporary time, right? So that's why here for put all things together, this is the reason I use now for this lecture one example, right? Smokestacks to go over the history from 1920s all the way to 2020s, and then to different parts of the world, right? From China, Asia, and then to North America, where now I reside, I stay, and then to Europe. Actually, I have a colleague, say he's doing some research regarding the smokestacks in Barcelona, Manchester, and also some European cities. So still, it might be forgotten, might be ignored in literary narrative, cinematic representation, because it's just the background, right? The very big thing, a huge smokestack. But then I say, wow, this is something maybe if we link all things together with scientific and literary, culture, semantic, investigation, and try to use different types of texts, and then we have new discoveries regarding these things, these feelings, and this project. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Son, sorry. Let's see, students, we would like to hear from you. Anyone would like to ask a question related to his talk, or make a comment? Have you seen any of the films or documentaries that Professor Son had been pointed out? We would like to hear from you.
Yeah, if I could show you the 5 film clips, I guess you can warm you up and get you more, this is juicy and, vivid pictures, episodes, slides regarding, the smokestack stories, narratives, sentiment. I can say still a kind of storytelling.
Let's see. Oh, well, I think it's, oh, no, but it's great because she's able to share the screen. So that's great.
Yes, she figured it out. Oh, this is, you had more time, I could figure it out as well and then show you.
I know. And I really want to pass on and introduce Professor Wang. But anybody would like to say something? Hello. Hi. Good evening. Good night. I don't know the time difference already. So that's so great. Okay, well, let's see if the students are not joining in right now. I will ask you to please, just anyone, let me just, before we move on, I think it would be nice if someone would say or address Professor Son, please. So I don't know, Alvaro Gonzalez, I know you're there, or Chelo, or Cristina, please. Anybody of you would like to make a comment or just say hi? Juan Luis is also there. Marcos, come on, please. Any one of you?
Hi.
Hello, thank you. Who is
Hi.
talking?
Yeah, I think I just want to say hello and
Oh, thank you, Virginia. Thank you so
Hey,
much.
Virginia,
I mean,
how are
Virginia,
you?
she's so
I'm fine, thank you.
participatory. She's always so nice that, you know, she always says thanks or says hi. And I was hoping to honor your classmates, but thank you so much, Virginia.
I'm pretty interested about the films that Dr. Song talked about, so I think I'm going to do some research. So look for them.
Oh, I will send you a link, you know, Virginia, wonderful.
Oh,
so
please.
films
Thank
and
you.
then it's available from YouTube. I'll give you the specific time and also from other sources from China. Great, Virginia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Virginia. And yeah, the Professor Sun will be so kind to also share his PowerPoint. So you will be also relying and going back to the documentaries and suggestions. So yeah, lots of new TV series and films to watch for this weekend. So thank you so much. Okay, so I think I'm going to move on and I'm going to introduce now Professor Wang, Dr. Xiaojue Wang. She is an associate professor of Chinese literature in the Department of Asian Languages and Cultures and an affiliated faculty in the program of comparative literature, also at Rutgers University in the US. She received her BA and her master in German literature at Peking University before entering here her PhD program in Germanic languages and literatures at Harvard University. Then she earned her PhD degree in comparative literature at Columbia University. She was one postdoctoral fellow at the Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies, also at Harvard University. And she has taught at the University of Pennsylvania and also as a visiting assistant professor in the Department of East Asian Languages and Civilizations at Harvard University. She is the author of Modernity with a Cold War Face, Reimagining the Nation in Chinese Literature Across the 1949 Divide. Is being published in 2014 by Harvard University Press. And she also has published numerous articles on modern Chinese literature, the Cultural Cold War, film and media studies, German literature, and comparative literature. And she is also the Chinese translator and co-translator of Junger Habermas. I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry, that's in German. And also Andreas Hassen's After the Great Divide, Modernism, Mass Culture, Postmodernism, among many others. And she's currently working on her second book on the prominent woman writer Eileen Chan in the context of the global cultural war. As I said before, it's an impressive resume. It is a great honor to host you in our lecture in our course today. And Dr. Wang's lecture is titled Dynamic Cultural Practices and Ethics in Mainland China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. So it's a great pleasure. Thank you so much, Professor Wang.
Thank you. I just want to have a quick test if you can hear me well.
Yes.
And I also tried the share screen, and I just want to make sure that everyone can see the slides here.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
beautiful. Thank you so much.
Maybe if you would like to put a full screen,
Yeah.
that will be great. But the sound is great, and we can see it perfectly. Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Sotelo, for inviting me here today to share what I've been, doing in my research with you and with your lovely cohort there at University of Burgos. It's my great pleasure. And Thank you so much for your kind introduction. Today, I'm going to talk about cultural dynamics and ethics in mainland China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. And, I would like to start with a recent variety show in mainland China during this post-pandemic time. In late summer of 2020, Dragon TV, Dragon TV, which is a satellite TV of Shanghai's radio and television station, started to broadcast its second season of this program called Voice of the Chinese Dream. Our song. This is one of the earliest variety shows that were back on air when the COVID-19 pandemic got under control in Chinese mainland. It gathered top singers from mainland China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong on stage. What I showed you here is an image from that show. So we're going to see the audience here, the audience with transparent masks on their face, covering their faces. So only the on-site audience with masks reminded of the pandemic situation outside. In the final episode, the featured performance is called Voices Through the Years, which is a remix of hit songs from the past decades, spanning from mainland China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and other Chinese language regions across the world. Let me probably show you a couple of minutes from this performance. Let's see if it works. I'm going to try to, to go to the YouTube.
Yes, perfect. We see it.
Okay. It's lagging a little, but it's coming, hopefully. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to show you a couple of minutes of the opening of this performance to get a sense of what I'm talking about. Can you hear the sound? Wonderful. So there is English subtitles, right? And wonderful. Okay, that will do for our purpose. Let me just switch back to the slides. Let's see here.
Yes, great.
Okay, now we're back to the slides. As you can see here, it's a very interesting performance in many ways. There is this voiceover narrative at the opening telling us about the history of radio in Chinese language regions over the past century and how it actually affected, the ways that people communicating with each other, how it affected the community, get a sense of both in identity and subjectivity. So the performance and also the stage design here, as you can see, it actually imitated a radio music programming, sort of like the best of the 80s and 90s remix, similar to a Billboard Radio China program. More importantly, the remix highlights the crucial role of radio as medium in transmitting music across ethnic and political boundaries of the Sinophone world and creating a sense of acoustic community. It attests to the cultural resilience, dynamics, and communication across borders. and also the role of media and technology to facilitate such cultural dialogues and connections during a time of pandemic. Today, my talk will focus on the following questions. How did mass media, particularly radio, shape the sonic cultural landscape across varied Chinese language regions? How did radio change the mode of communication among people across borders? How did it affect human relations and family ethics? My case of study is 1950s and 60s Hong Kong as a nexus of different Chinese communities and cultures. Okay, here, what I include in the slide is a movie poster for this amazing movie by Hong Kong director Wang In the Mood for Love, 2000. So in this film, In the Mood for Love, it has a now classic scene set in a rental building in 1962 Hong Kong. The sequence begins with a long panning shot of a tube radio set. In a close-up shot, as the camera slowly pans over the smooth surface of the radio, on the soundtrack, the female voice of the program announces that a traveling businessman, Mr. Chen, requested a song for his wife to convey birthday wishes. Let me try to show you a quick clip from this film, if it works this time. Bear with me, there's a bit lagging, couple of seconds lagging from the slides to the, let's see, open, let me see. Okay, I'm not sure. So, wonderful.
Very good.
Thank you so much for confirming. Let me just show you a.
有一位喺日本公幹嘅陳先生係點呢一首歌俾佢嘅太太欣賞嘅，祝佢生日快樂，工作順利。而家請大家一齊收聽周璇唱嘅《花樣的年華》。
花样的年华，月样的青山，平时遥远梦。
Okay, just this couple of minutes will do for our purpose, just to get a sense of you know, what the director tried to convey for that time period. Okay, now we're back to the slides.
Yes, very good.
Okay, thank you so much. So what we just saw from that brief clip is the you know, the moment when we're going to hear from, on the soundtrack, the requesting of one particular song for his wife while he was traveling in Japan. So the song that plays is actually the recording of Blooming Years, 花样的年华, which actually makes the title of this film, performed by Zhou Xuan, a beloved movie and singing star of the 1930s and 40s Shanghai. So what I captured here in the slides are that panning shot we just saw from the clip that actually divided by the war our two protagonists. As the familiar tune brings the audience back to the good old days of Republican Shanghai, the camera moves to Mrs. Chen on the, you know, the right-hand side of the picture here in the slides, sitting alone in the kitchen, leaning against the wall. Then The camera moves to the left to show Mr. Zhou, her neighbor and love interest, on the opposite side of the wall, holding, actually very interestingly, an electronic rice cooker. At that time, quite a novelty, just like radio itself. The film, In the Mood for Love, tells the story of a married man, Mr. Zhou, and a married woman, Mrs. Chen, as we see here in the slides. They live in the rented neighboring rooms of an apartment building, fall in love with each other while dealing with the infidelities of their respective spouses, whom they discover are having an affair with each other. It provides a nostalgic look at the 1960s Chinese migrant communities in Hong Kong, when the Cold War division in Asia forced millions of Chinese from mainland China into the British colony of Hong Kong, and when Chinese traditional cultural values coexisted with the fragmenting forces of modernity. The song that we just heard from the soundtrack, Blooming Years, was originally featured in the 1947 movie, 长相思, An All-Consuming Love. As it conveys sentiments of family separation, homesickness, pains of exile and uprootedness during the Second Sino-Japanese War, the song very well speaks to the diasporic condition of mainland Chinese in Hong Kong, when the 1949 divide in China brought an even deeper sense of severance and displacement to Chinese people. Through the radio sound wave, Zhou Xuan, as we can see here, the star, and her image on the right-hand side of the slide, her singing voice, rendering the ambience of old Shanghai, streams into the convoluted hallways across separate apartments divided to house multiple migrant families. The sequence not only points to the theme of family relations and ethics, passion, betrayal, and regrets, but also show how the prevalent medium of radio created an acoustic imprint of that very era for emigre community in particular, lamenting over an unattainable homeland. As the film director Wang remarked in the interview, post-war Hong Kong was an era of radio. So how did radio shape the sonic Sinophone landscape in post-war Hong Kong? With the unprecedented mass migration and transnational flows of resources, consumer goods, technologies, and ideas, and today even virus, how would this form of technologized sound medium contribute to the assumption, consolidation, or subversion of new identities and subjectivities within or across borders? Today, in my talk, I will consider these questions through a tuning in to the radioscape of the 1960s Hong Kong, and in particular through an examination of the woman writer Eileen Chang's cross-media cultural practice. In 1950s and 60s Hong Kong, the vibrant radio programming and its wide accessibility contributed to the identity formation of a newly emergent Sinophone community. There were three main radio stations during this time period. What we see here, the first is the colonial government's official broadcasting station, Radio Hong Kong. The next one is a wired radio Radiofusion, which the main station was located in the UK, but it has several substations across Southeast Asia. And later, we see the rise of Hong Kong commercial radio starting in 1959. They brought robust, diverse programming, which include news, current affairs, sky fiction, radio drama, and a variety of music programs, which were broadcast in English, in Cantonese, in Mandarin Chinese, and other Chinese dialects. Listening to radio constructed an integral part of daily lives for the mainland emigre, as well as local communities. Tuning in to a beloved program in the scheduled time in the living room, in the common lounge of a crowded rental building, at the food stand or tea stop, created a specific form of communal space and a sense of unity, connection, and communication. As Anthony Storr observed in Music and the Mind, I quote, "At the emotional level, there's something deeper about hearing than seeing, and something about hearing other people which fosters human relations even more than seeing them," unquote. Listening to one specific program airing at a specific time constructed a shared simultaneity of experience, which is crucial to Benedict Anderson's concept of modern imagined communities. Instead of a single auditory national culture, the radioscape in post-war Hong Kong was marked by its cultural and linguistic diversity. Let's take a look at some popular radio programs. What I included here is an image of a vacuum tube radio set. Today is quite vintage, sort of like the in the opening slide that I showed you. But at that time, this is something kind of a luxury for ordinary families of the time. So a few interesting radio programs that are very popular at that time period. First, it was radio drama, including traditional storytelling, sky fiction with one single person narrator, and dramatized radio plays featuring multiple performers. Traditional storytelling, such as Fang Rong's Jianggu, was mostly adapted from traditional Chinese vernacular fictions, especially historical tales, martial arts adventures, and courtese novels. It marked an auditory continuity with pre-1949 popular culture in South China, not just because it delivered in Cantonese, but also because it illustrates traditional moral and cultural virtues, such as justice, filial piety, integrity, and courage. These storytelling programs were recorded and transmitted to local radios in Macau, Singapore, Malaya, and other Southeast Asian Chinese communities, and created a sense of cultural China on the air. What I have here is a recent film from 2015 by a Singapore director, Royce Chan. The film is entitled 3688, a very mysterious code. It portrays a very memorable father character dubbed Uncle Radio by his neighbors, who suffers from dementia and wanders from door to door trying to, here is a image from the film that he carried to receivers of the radio rediffusion radio station, which was so popular in the 1950s and 60s. But the picture showed him suffering from dementia, trying to sell radio rediffusion to his neighbors in 2000, which, of course, this radio station has already long disappeared in Singapore. From but for him, for Uncle Radio here, as we see here, and for people of his generation, the vanishing sound wave of like Li Dasha, as we can see here, one of the most popular radio performer at that time period for storytelling. He and his voice still lingered in their mind of a bygone era. A second major type of radio program that is so popular is sky fiction, which often concerned with contemporary themes. Many sky fiction stories dealt with problems caused by recent Chinese civil war and national divides, such as family separation and loss, infidelity and betrayal, migration, poverty, and resettlement. I showed you here a picture of the leading sky drama performer Li Wo at that time period. And in the next slide, we see a film poster for one of the popular sky fiction entitled Mayflowers in the Rain. So many of those sky fictions were adapted onto the big screen and very quickly, just over a time lapse of a couple of months. So as you can see, the popularity of this type of performance. In this movie poster, it highlights a series of buzzwords. For those of you who can read Chinese in this very tiny characters, but let me point it out, a few buzzwords for this commercial to appeal to the audience, which include family, ethics, love, and grand tragedy. What was circulated and shared in the listening communities were not just melodramatic stories, but also ethical values and mediated cultural tensions, which were much needed in a transitional society longing for restoration and stability. For recent Chinese immigrants, a third beloved radio program was Mandarin modern songs called 时代曲, so which are a type of pop songs during the time period, which together with the Cantonese opera took more than half of the on-air hours of Radio Hong Kong's 1950s program. Here I included a timetable for the Radiofusion radio station on November 27th, 1956. From this program itself, if we do a quick statistics, we'll see that for a daily program starting 7 a.m. through midnight, 时代曲, so pop songs, takes up about 2 hours of the 17-hour broadcasting time, so quite an important section. 时代曲 prevailed originally in Republican Shanghai and turned into a sonic expressive form in the growing cosmopolitan Hong Kong with the promotion of the Pathé Records, the NPNGI, and Shaw Brothers Mandarin Cinema as well. The radio sequence that the second short clip that I just showed you from Wang Kaiwai's film In the Mood for Love, it provides a good example of how this form of popular music circulated on air during that time period. The 1960s witnessed a growing interest in studying the material and technological aspects of mass communication, a field that we later call today media studies. Why that particular time period? Why the timing? Right? As a scholar, Eric Havelock recounted, scholars of the 1960s, like himself, who got interested in the topic of orality and communication, belonged to the first generation of listeners, acoustically nurtured on shortwave broadcasts at a time marked by new ways of recording, storing, and transmitting sounds and voices. McLuhan's iconic line in his 1964 work, Understanding Media and the Extension of Man, Medium as a Message, proposes that medium not to be considered as a transparent tool to mediate the message. Rather, the medium itself and mediality becomes the subject matter of research. In Requiem for the Media, Baudrillard clarifies that the medium as the message operates a transfer of meaning onto the medium itself qua technological structure. What Baudrillard maintains is that media are not neutral technological systems whose social impact depends on who uses them to say what. Rather, it was in their form and very operation that they induce social relations. Or as later stated by the German scholar Friedrich Kittler, media determine our situation. Regarding the mediascape of post-war Hong Kong, particularly its radio culture, we may wonder how media in their forms and technologies and their very operation affected and shaped new ideas, perceptions of time and space, and human behavior in relationships. Although never a scholar of media and communication herself, the renowned woman writer Eileen Chang offered fascinating thoughts on these questions in her multimedia cultural practice as a writer, as a film critic, and as a screenwriter. I will now turn to the 1962 NPNGI film, A Greatest Wedding on Earth, directed by Wang Tianling, with Eileen Chang serving as their screenwriter, to see how she explores the impact of media on everyday life, human relations, and family ethics. But first, let me just very quickly share with you some background information of this very interesting woman writer, Zhang Eileen, better known by her English name, Eileen Chang, here. She was a translingual Chinese and English, but also a transgeneric cultural practitioner, spanning from Chinese mainland, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the United States of America. She was regarded as one of the foremost Chinese authors of 20th century. As someone who uses both English and Chinese, her work is still less well known internationally than it deserves. Born into a distinguished family, she grew up in the dual atmosphere of traditional Chinese high culture and the increasing influence of the West. She achieved great literary fame in occupied Shanghai during the Second Sino-Japanese War, which is the 1940s, with her short story collection, Romances, and her essay collection, Written on Water, which represented some of her best works. She wrote about quotidian lives in order to explore human nature and frailty, which undercut the grand narratives of nationalism, patriotism, and revolution in mainstream Chinese literature at that time period. Focusing on characters from declining aristocratic families stranded in the transition to modernity, her early works established an aesthetic of everyday life marked by a pervasive mood of desolation. Due to her ambiguous political stance, she was virtually erased from official literary history after the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949. In 1952, she left Shanghai for Hong Kong and eventually for the United States of America, where she led a reclusive life until she passed away in 1995. Her early books I mentioned include a short story collection and essay collections I show here. Very interesting book covers that she herself designed, actually. She is also a passionate painter, especially for illustrations, as you can see here. After the 1950s, she actually never returned to China. During her 3-year stay in Hong Kong, she wrote 2 English language political fictions. And after she moved to the United States of America, she finished some more writings in English, but also in Chinese. What is worth mentioning here is the resurgence of this writer in Chinese language regions, mostly thanks to Professor C.T. Hsia's attention to this writer since the 1960s. Professor Hsia's book, History of Modern Chinese Fiction, included a long chapter dedicated to Eileen Chang and her work, in which he praised her as the best and most important Chinese writers today, which helped to later propel a resurgence of Eileen Chang's popularity as well as scholarly attention in Chinese language regions like mainland China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and other overseas Chinese regions. Her cross-media works, including film, plays, and radio dramas, have been less well studied. Eileen Chang was an enthusiast for new media. She not only contributed film reviews, but also wrote film scripts in post-war Shanghai, Hong Kong, and America. Between the year 1947 and 1964, she finished 14 film scripts altogether. Here I included some film posters of her work. For instance, 1947, the movie Long Live the Missus. 1963 in Hong Kong, Father Takes a Bride. Most of these films are sophisticated comedies and urban romances that combine elements taken from what some critics called American screwball comedy and Chinese family drama with an ethical attention and dimension. Zhang's NP and GI films, together with other Hong Kong Mandarin Chinese films, were circulated as part of the emerging world cinema as a newly established Asian Film Festival and participated in the process of creating Hong Kong as a place of worldly engagement routed to other non-communist regions across the Cold War-free Asia. Eileen Chang, together with a number of film directors, developed a film style that not only promotes key values of modernization, worldly consciousness, and border-crossing mobility, but also attends to the impact of media on gender sensibility and family ethics in the changing society of Hong Kong. So now I'm going to zoom in to this film, 1962, Greatest Wedding on Earth. So very quickly about this film, it's an urban comedy set in 1960s Hong Kong. A Cantonese-speaking young man, Shen Qingwen, falls in love with Li Manling, who has migrated from Chinese mainland with her family after 1949. The romance encounters a series of obstacles from parental sides due to the cultural conflicts between Mandarin-speaking Northerners and the Cantonese-speaking native Hong Kong families. The mainlander Manling speaks both Mandarin and Cantonese fluently and works at the local radio station as host for a Cantonese talk show called Happy Families, which helps people through their family issues and offer advices. Qingwen's the guy's father, who objects his sons dating any mainland girls, was a faithful fan of the girls' radio show and tuned into it every day. Thanks to radio's wireless transmission of voice, Qingwen's father didn't realize that the radio host was not from local Hong Kong. Here I included two images from the movie. One is in the living room of Manling, the girl's family. The other is the moment when she serves as the host in the radio station at that time period. As you can see, the different in technologies, machines, which are at that time very advanced. In the film, through the radio program, the mainlander's voice in the most intimate and inclusive tone invades the living room. Manling's radio talk, with the moral and cultural values it transmits, supplements or sometimes challenges the paternal authoritative voice in Shen's family. When he first met Manling as his son's girlfriend, Qingwen's father felt as if he has known this girl for a long time, although this was the first time that he met her ever. Only later in the film did the father realize that his original déjà vu impression was actually déjà entendu. Manling is the host of his favorite radio show. It was the oral familiarity rather than visual that gave him a sympathetic feeling about the girl. The merging of the acoustic Manling with the corporeal one exposed her identity as a mainlander, which provoked Qingwen's father and broke off their engagement. In this light, the space-transcending quality of the medium of radio, together with its location at the center of the family circle, holds out both promise and threat. The comedy centers on the cultural antagonism between the Mandarin speakers and the native Cantonese speakers through a series of dialect jokes and colloquial humor. With Cantonese being the lingua franca in Hong Kong, accurate linguistic utterances become immediate indicators of group affiliations and enable effective communication and human relation. What has been conveyed in the movie is not just tensions between different dialect-speaking people, but also the tension between conventional forms of communication via spoken language and new forms of technologized communication via modern sound media. The effectiveness of communication was also facilitated by the emergent modern media. The mediation of radio in the film, for instance, reveals the operation of modern media technologies might engender a new orality in communication that helps create human understandings across linguistic and cultural barriers in post-war Hong Kong. A number of sequences in the film portray the competition of the technologized sounds in Shen living room, the typewriter, telephone, radio, interspersed with arguing voices among family members. One of the major Shen family living room scenes begins with a close-up shot, as we can see here on the left-hand side, of a tube radio. with Manling's voice on the soundtrack hosting the Happy Family show. The camera then cuts to the right-hand side image, that is Qingwen's father, sitting next to the radio, listening to his favorite host, talking about the importance of following the advice of one's parents. Manling's voice on air was interfered by a loud typing noise coming from the other end of the living room, as we can see here in the next slide. As the camera pans across the room to track the source of the dissonant competing sound, we see the daughter, Pei Ming, working at her typewriter, a modern profession for young women at that time in Hong Kong. The father requested the daughter to stop disrupting his radio show and join him to listen to some good senses of ethical practice. The camera moves to the center of the living room, showing the father and daughter confronted in argument. The mother, however, sitting quietly in the back, and Manling's feminine persuasive voice channeled by the radio saying that the kids need to conform to their parents. So in this scene, as we see here from the slide, the mother's conventional role as the mediator in the family was now replaced by the radio voice on the soundtrack. In the next scene, the telephone rings abruptly from the console table next to the door. The daughter Pei Ming, ran over and started chatting with her friend about the Latin music in the newly released film. The use of high contrast side lighting here projects her shadow on the wall, suggesting a doppelganger theme converted acoustically to electronic signals from the other end of the cable. Now the phone conversation almost entirely drowned the radio show. The father got really infuriated and started to scold the daughter as a defiant child of a new era. The sonic interaction and competition in the entire sequence, affected by modern media of sound transmission, points to the clash of cultural and ethical values between generations, which were at the center of the film to portray a transitional time in Hong Kong. On the other hand, however, what Eileen Chang seeks to tease out in this sequence is also an impact of media on configuring people's communication and relationships. And not only what ethical, it's not just the ethical values the media transmit by home to home, but more importantly, how the operation of new media of sound transmission and oral communication shaped the way people conceive family relationships, cultural and linguistic conflicts, and the modern cosmopolitan urban identity in Hong Kong. With the radio at the center, the typewriter and telephone on either side of the room, the family living room turned into a battleground of technologized sounds, as well as a testing ground of new ideas and relations. Let me very quickly sum up today's talk. So basically, we have discussed the radio culture in post-war Hong Kong as a melting point at that time, melting pot, but also meeting point between mainland China, Taiwan, and other overseas Chinese communities. We sought to examine the dynamic radioscape and how modern media shaped new ways of communication and human relationship. The prosperity of vibrant radio programs in multiple languages and dialects contributed to the formation of post-war communities. From sky fiction to popular music, from storytelling to radio drama, Hong Kong airwaves helped reflect on social and cultural problems and dynamics caused by both recent national divide and also Hong Kong's economic takeoff. From 1960s to today, 2021, as we can see here, these two juxtaposing images, we're going to see that radio turned from a novelty into today's vintage nostalgic objects on stage. Modern modes of technologized communication via sound media joined force in a diverse soundscape in Hong Kong, mainland China, and across overseas Chinese communities, facilitating new channels of communication, new forms of human relations and identities in the transitional time of assimilation and modernization. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wang. Thank you very much for a very interesting lecture. I've learned a lot about the particular context of Taiwan, which it's not widely taught in European context, but in the particular case of Spain. And this is also why this course is so important, to learn about different cultures from different disciplines, and especially your analysis of the 1950s. I think it's very insightful to understand the roots of a particular profile, a particular voice, if it can be called that way, in terms of Hong Kong's cultural production as mainline China production. So in that sense, thank you for providing this particular situated analysis. As always, students, please, I would like to hear from you, comments, questions. I will start off. Well, I have Christina. Okay, so we have a student. So that's great. Christina, please, Christina Diaz, if you would like to activate the camera, I'm sure Professor Wang will appreciate that.
Yes, one moment.
Thank you, Christina.
What moment?
Sure, take your time.
Yes, bye. One question. Do you think that after the opens that China is experiencing, is the culture can be strongly after, or the contrary, that is the becomes stronger?
Thank you, Christina. Could you, because the sound, we're talking about sound transmitting, is not very clear at my end. Could you repeat your question, please?
Yes, Christina, could you repeat your question?
Yes.
Someone has the mic activated. I think is. Oh, I think it's Alberto. Alberto, if you could deactivate the mic. And if no, well, just try to repeat the question.
Thank you. Now it's.
Yes, don't worry. Do you think that after opens that China is experiencing, is the culture can be strongly after, or on the contrary, that is because stronger?
Let's see, Christina, can you, it's difficult also for me to understand. Can you say it in Spanish? I will translate it.
Yes, don't worry. A ver, te lo digo en español si quieres.
Sí, dímelo.
Si piensa que después del aperturismo que está experimentando China, su cultura puede ser fuertemente afectada, o sea, la cultura china, obvio, o por el contrario, que se refortalezca más la cultura.
Vale, okay, so she's talking about not just Taiwan, but she's talking about this openness in China. We had some lectures about, well, a lecture about China, and so if you, her question is in a way trying to compare and also the influence of this cultural production from Taiwan. Do you think, she wants to know to what extent do you think all this cultural production in Taiwan is going to affect, is going to shape mainline cultural production or not?
Thank you so much for the question. And it's it directly point out to, I think, one of the key themes of my research, that is how to evaluate this interactions, across borders, the interactions between different regions like China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and it's not just the Chinese language regions, but it also includes, the Eurasian regions, but also Latin America. Because, for instance, let me just give 2 quick points. One is the Latin craze for the Latin music in the 1960s. It kind of, if we sort of look into the popular culture production and in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, in China, even in the 1960s, we can see the performance of like different Latin music like cha-cha or mambo, dance and music, also in that part of the globe. So which means how culture circulated in the form of pop music, dance, and other types of popular culture in the more and more opening of a globalizing world. It didn't just start from late 20th century, but it actually already started in mid 20th century when we're going to see, the Cold War climate internationally created new regions of connection and integration. A second quick point is just to use the example that I included in the talk today of this recent variety show, The Voices of Chinese Dream. What we see here on stage are actually not just this vintage image of a tube radio set, but also the artists, the singers, they came from different regions, one coming from Hong Kong, the other from, Southwest China. And also we have singers from Taiwan and Singapore. So you will know that through this kind of music show, it brings together the artists and performers from across political or ethnic regions and trying to highlight, the possibility and this very dynamic interaction of people across different political or cultural borders. Hope it kind of replies to Christina's questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. I don't know if any other student would like to make a comment or a question. Please raise your hand. There is someone who raised their hand. Let's see. Okay. Is Yadira?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, Yadira.
Hello, very good afternoon. Dr. Wang, thank you very much for the lecture. It was very touching for me because I grew up in Colombia, and in the 80s we didn't have a TV. And I have great memories of my family listening to the radio, the news in the morning, and my mom ironing while listening to the soap opera. So it was a special memories. And it's a pity that we are not aware of its culture because we don't see their films or read their books. And my question is, are Chinese people familiarized with the European and American iconic films or books?
Thank you. Thank you, Dalila. I really appreciate you sharing, your memory of your family listening to radio, because that's also part of my growing up, experiences. Especially, I think a few decades earlier, when TV or the other mass media were not as popular as today. Radio, actually, because of its accessibility, it actually created such a it's very intimate warm, community. It's family, it's neighbor community, and people sharing, especially because those programs, they have scheduled time, like every day during lunchtime, there will be this type of performance, and the dinner time. So it gathers, people across different streets, blocks, communities, and brings people together. And it's such a important way of, for me, cultural really exchanges. And through this particular medium, today we also see like other radio is back. Actually, it's no more like an old memory, but it's back in a more, digitalized way. Like we have the podcast, right, and iTunes also have channels and so on and so forth. And your question is about if in China people have chance to get familiar with like European writers or films, right? Totally,
Yes.
definitely. I mean, it's more and more available today. I think in the during early times, it's mostly through translations. In like 1980s, mainland China, one of a very popular radio program is called Translated Novels from Europe. So we're going to hear that the host will narrate, but a section, or sometimes abbreviated, like a story summary from like a more classical, like 19th century, like Balzac, or even earlier, like Shakespeare, or Jane Austen later, and so on and so forth. So that's one form through the translated books, but narrated on radio. The second form is translated films. Like, as I said, they will do some editing, and through the radio, we'll have the performer to kind of perform this dubbing of a segment, like those most touching moments, like in Jane Eyre. They will say like, okay, I'm a play woman, but I also have my vision and type of things. And those programs were so popular. It shaped, two generations at least, not just their, memory and personal memory, but also the way that they envision a world and where to put China in this large global community. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Wonderful moments of sharing.
Yes, that is so great, and I think that's also one of my reflections. That not just as an icon, the radio, but as a medium of communication and as a medium of community building. Definitely, I can see that it's cross-cultural. Also, it provided a class difference back in the days, and not so back in the days, like also in rural areas in Spain. We're talking about 60s. Only a few families could have a radio, and all neighbors will gather, and the same happened with the first television. So it is interesting to see how this mediated technological medium, in a way reflected very different intercultural experiences. And I guess we can definitely sign this as the precedent of social media, which is different, of course, but this idea, because you very well said that how radio has transformed into social media podcasts and social media platforms, and so my question has to do also with the coronavirus pandemic context in a way. I don't know if you know, for example, I mean, not just traditional radio, but is it an increase on listeners in podcasts, or you don't know about this? It's not part of your research. I was just wondering if if you also have looked into, you know, the more modern form of this radio.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's actually very important. I personally didn't do like statistics on the, you know, the proportion if there will be an increase, but according to my research, there's definitely an increase, and I think a few things that demonstrated that, because as we can see, especially during the lockdown time, you cannot lock down, you know, streaming online, and that not only it's the kind of breakthrough, but it actually provides a great venue for people who are in an individual, you know, kind of spot of quarantine, but the voice and images, the media, like what I have learned a great deal today from this new platform, Microsoft Teams. You know, we've been using different platforms of this, you know, telecommunication, like Zoom or the Google also has its own platform and so on and so forth. It kind of actually increases the possibility and accessibility of you know, cross-cultural dialogues that we are having now. You know, it made it much more affordable, and also you know, across different time zones, across the language or linguistic, although between Europe and America, the flights are still very rare, right? There's still a lot of limitations. But I think through this streaming, the internet, and also radio podcast, it kind of it brought new ways of creating communication, bridging different, you know, continents, bridging people that we are still fighting together, where we're still sharing a lot of, you know, cultural and ethical values, despite, or maybe thanks to the pandemic. It gives us even more sense of tighter relationship, and we're together in the world sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I truly appreciate your answer and your feedback, and I'm sure this will be something to follow, how the pandemic is also developing. Hopefully it will come to an end soon.
Yeah.
So, well, I think it's time to wrap up our course. I would have loved to hear from more of you. You still have a little bit more minutes. I also would like, if it's okay, also with Professor Wang, I don't know if Professor Song is still around and wants to take a photo, or he has other commitment. No worries. Would you mind if we take a photo? Oh, hello, that's so nice. Thank you. All right, so, well, let's see. Students, please activate the camera so we can take a photo. Let me just get one form of, yeah, like this. Okay.
Such a pleasure to see all your faces.
Yeah, right?
Wonderful.
I don't know why they are so shy and they don't interact as much, but I know you're there, some of you, and the rest, maybe you have problems connecting. Don't you want to connect? Because some of you still have no cameras. And if not, doesn't matter. Okay, just the brave of us. Let's take a photo at the count of 3. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, another one just in case. Another one. 1, 2. Okay, perfect. So thank you so much to Professor Song, Professor Wang. Thank you. It's been great to have you in our course. Thank you to all our students also, and to the EURASIA Foundation from Asia and Burgos University. So sending our kindest regards from Burgos, and hope we can see you and meet you personally in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. And to see such beautiful faces on screen.
Yeah.
Stay well, everyone, and still connected.
Exactly the same. Stay healthy, stay
Thank
safe,
you.
and
Thank
be
you.
positive. Thank you so much to all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.